How's everybody doing? Everybody's doing extremely well. Now's the time to really understand how to use the mind conceptual setting to the simulations of opening up through simulators that you are instructions. Consciously being aware, knowing exactly, don't see anything line communication, open up the door line. You'd open the door line, opens up the frame, opens up the windows, lines carrying adaptation to a system to your pyramid. Pyramid activates the screen lines adaptation, adds the flux screen adaptation system soon as you touch the handle. Once you touch the handle, you're in outer space right away. Where you are, well, that's totally up to you, where you put yourself in the mind perception. The mind is the perception of creating. It's for you to recognize that already. For you to understand that you're always in existing, but you're always in evolving and explaining and exploring yourself in that position. So it's much easier to understand that, how to use the cross-referencing to your mind into the space lines of travel, into the paradigms, okay, into the compulsories, all right, into the pulsars, okay, to the paradoxals, okay, in position, location, attractions. So we have to really understand to have nothing in our mind when we open up or touch anything and travel. It's all identification setting. The mind has already set it up through its conception, to its interconnection setting, to its interception, to its mind of inception. Now, in that communication setting, process you how to use that in all lines of forms. So everything you touch, nothing in the mind, nothing in sequence, nothing in panel, nothing in operation, because that changes everything in your settings of travel. Okay? All right, so now we get position lines, your blueprints, and know exactly how to come into that through a circuitry box. A center box communications of a motherboard that process lines into a circuitry line centers location of travel. Electrical interference, static interference, magnetic interference, electrical lines, the impulse interference. There's so many communication settings of travel. So what you have to identify, first understanding that, so the box frame setting lines of travel. Okay, there's your house, right? Now, travel in that position of 3 centers of travel communications, all right? Now, you're in somebody else's house, okay? That's somebody else's house, right? But you're identifying the travel of communication setting in travel communications. So directing, redirecting, right? So you're directing in and you're directing out, okay? You're directing out and you're directing in set traction and communications. So what you have to stand is the flux over screen adaptation setting through its highway. Process in that position location of systems all through traction in set lines of communication. Okay, so once you understand that, everything comes in a panel of operation screen adaptation. Okay, so it's very powerful what direct and redirect is. You have to understand how we come into the clockwise, counterclockwise, clockwise. But clockwise itself is going into outer space. So it's very important that you perceive in the mind a projection because it's already set up. So the communication of the avatar is getting into a triangulation reset to get you in a position that's already set in division, right? You're getting it through vision. So you have a door here, and you're going through 3 plots and travel, okay? And then you go through location grid, right? And then you go through the security defense line, okay? Now, when you open up the door, it doesn't matter what handle you go through, but position of the high line settings, the high sequence lines, the right hand is left, and now the left hand is right. In that position, so it goes in 2 angles, the 2 point lanes of graph, and 2 tractions. Now, once it comes in line coordinate centers, you set up the flux at 3 centers of travel, all through a door, right? The door comes in, position locations. Now, this is actually the actual pyramid itself in travel, okay? So it sets calculation lines of grounds, high lines of sequence, panels, communication, highest travels in point length graph. There's your pyramid, all through a door. You see the pyramid now, right? And the full lines of volume. Sets calculation lines, and then you positions, you go through another pyramid, okay? So you keep constantly going through pyramids, 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 pyramids. One pyramid to the next, right? Travels point lines of graph, and another pyramid in line coordinates centers of travel, directing ground centers, line communication system, all through tractions, right? 3 pyramids in one cycle, right? One center, back in traction, back division, back in center. All through triangulation, right? No thoughts, no actions, no emotions, and provision. So when you go through a door, you go through another pyramid and set position outline space. The outline space is the inner space, which is the inner spectrum of scope. You have inner scope and outer scope. Inner perception, outer perception. You have internal and external. It's a communication setting of flux. It sets lines, ground center location to its grounds, its powers, and its atmospheres. Grounds, powers, atmospheres. Okay? So you come in this is where it comes in the molecular structure of the structure line, division location of schematics. Ground centers, powers, atmosphere, structure line. 3 molecules. Supposition of 1, supposition of 2, and suppositions of 3 of travel. opens up a portal to another line screen adaptation to another pyramid that sets line communication setting to travel communications. Okay? Now, if one tunnels your system all through grounds to surface and travel. Okay? So it's true to understand how you go through different lines of dimensional doors and sequence lines of communication system all through travel. So it becomes more Doctor Strange in communications. So once you get in position locations, you understand if you go through a box frame, okay? So this gets really interesting. Everything in setting is all lines of all communication, what it is in travel, right? So you're looking at the box of directs and you're looking at redirects, okay? You're looking at direct and you're looking at redirect all at once, each corner, right? So it's direct and redirect. Everything is redirect and direct and redirect, okay? Direct and redirect, all right? So it's processing yin yang, yin and yang, yin and yang, yin and yang, right? So it's circulation lines going this way and this way. Circulation going this way and this way. Fibonacci going this way and this way. Fibonacci going this way and this way in set positions, all right? And you haven't gone through the door yet or through the box, right? But you always have to have a triangulation box in the center operation of your system, all right? So once you get into that, then you come into volume, okay? And then you come into volume. There's your pyramid, okay? And all set calculations, right? So you got 4 wormholes that you go through in tractions. You have the same directions and downshift lines of anomaly, crossing angles and screen adaptations of flux, right? But you still haven't gone through the door yet, right? So directing lines of flux has 3 lines of screens adaptation and setting of travel. So there's the pyramid there, there's another pyramid there, and set lines of travel, right? So you have 3 ground centers, high lines, sequence lines of panel, operation lines of calculation, setting, portals, and position, location, security, process, and calculation of wormholes and traction, right? Directing ground centers, but you still haven't gone through the door yet. So you have to truly understand how they come in that position, location of systems all through your pyramid and your astral projections out through travel. Sets calculation grounds, set lines of 1, platforms of 2, process inside, outside line travels, in-point communication graphs, and set directions. Okay? Above the system, okay? Center operation of the system. Okay? So you're working with 3 panels, operation line, calculation setting, astral projection, astral travels, astral travels. Okay? Pyramid 1, pyramid 2, and pyramid 3. Right? Process line, direct signal lines of grounds, calculation system, all through travel. But you still haven't gone through the door yet. It's at travel. Okay? Powerful, powerful stuff. So you set up the grids, the powers, and the axes. 3 pyramids in one setting. That's just 3. The team and the units and the operators are going to be in 5 pyramids in one cycle and 144,000 miles per second. Your clocking system is going to be in line standing location systems. So you have to truly understand how to come in that communication system. So as soon as you put your handle, you're going to be outer space, inner space, travel. Location grid, setting lines. So you set up the location grid, you set up the panels, and send lines of communication to the atmospheres, right? So, and then you change the ground centers of surface and travel communications, and your direct lines of links and process communication with ceilings into the powers and location to its setting location, and direct signal opposite line centers. But you have a formation lines of grounds into position location of face recognition and travel. There's the set position, all right? And you still haven't gone through the door, right? So this all sets up already. So these are 3 simulations in one, right? So you're going to 3 directions in one. You guys are trying to understand how to open up a door through simulation. When you open up a door, you can be in 5 different directions in one cycle. You can be in 12,000 simulations just by opening up a door. Outer space, inner spectrum, set the coordinates, right through travel, right? But you have to set up the location grid, right? You set up the location grid, it protects the travel through its portal. Everything is a line position location that's boxed in. You don't box yourself in, you're totally exposed when you open up that door. When you use your thoughts in the mind and perception, that's where you're going to be in real time. Anything you say in the mind and perception, it's going to take you there. But you should already know that because it's already set up through your blueprint. So once you get a better understanding how to use that information system, you understand and come into that in 3 pyramids of activation. But you still haven't gone through the door yet, right? So once you get it in that positions, now we go to the door. Okay, so it's amazing how the simulation's already set up, right? So here's the door, okay, but this is the actual door. That's the door. Okay, that's the door. So the door is actually a pyramid in set position. That's the actual door. But you don't see it. You only see the door, right? You only see the handle. Oh, look at that. It disappeared by itself, see? Okay, there's the handle. You see it, right? Now, once you open that, And once you touch the door, all right, that's setting lines of sequence over left line screen, directing lines of right. Okay, crossing lines of angles, center line communication lines of one center, travels in point lines the opposite center, location open lines of sequence in set position, right? So in that position, you touch the door, it becomes magnetic in three centers, the three grounds of surface attraction. Okay, so when that does, it sets lines across line connecting your constellations, which is your three-line communication of forks, sets calculation lines of grounds of past, present, and future adaptation. Three centers of travel. Oh, look at that, it disappeared. Three centers of travel, okay? All right, so the platform comes in line course centers, but you got to ground your system on set positions. So your pyramid, you got to ground your centers because you have a crop circle line communication setting and track communications. All right, so that's what happens in set position. So you start here, you're on your crop circle and setting, okay? So you energize to your platform and travels in point lines of graph communication. You energize in position location to its door. All right, and set lines communication to its platform, sets course centers into another platform, the door, the opposite direct signal location system all through travel. Okay? So, and you're just touching the door. So the door is going in position to the past, the present, and the future all at once. Okay? It has to set up and travel. Okay? So it's lines center, clockwise, back clockwise, center operation. So you have to stand the outer space, inner spectrum, set lines of delta, lines of travel, right? So you're clockwise this way, right, left, right, 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 left, right. But with your hand, it's left, right, left, left, right, left, okay? So that's what you have to understand how to open up a door. When you open up the door, you open up the travels of time. Multiple levels of line communication setting to travel, okay? So it's very powerful. Let's get into sequence lines of grounds, right? But it's amazing how you come in that position location of systems. So now, once you go to higher frequencies, the door itself is actually its pyramid. It's much easier to see it through laser track centers and locations, right? But you start with the door here. That's the door you see, right? Because that's all you know. And you see the handle, right? So you have to understand the platforms. There's the platform, right? There's the equilibrium. There's an equilibrium in set position. So what's above, what's below, right? Okay, so you got a platform setting, and you have multiple levels in direct locations. So you have doors going this way in tractions, doors going this way in tractions, doors going this way in tractions in set position, all through calculation, all right? So what you're doing is you're changing light screens and direct course centers in location of your pyramid. Okay, you're setting lights off in all communications setting and travel and communications, right? So when you go through that door, you're going through the past, you're going through the present, and you're going to the future right away in set position. And then you come back in center of operation through pi. Okay? So that's what you're doing. So what you're doing as you're traveling through a delta heading, you're automatically going through a set line communication of solar sail. You're traveling through a solar sail. Okay? So you're gliding, right? You're vortexing, time leaping, time jumping, whatever you want to do. But it's all in the mind that's already set up in conception. So you have to understand the blueprints of box frames of what you set position all levels as your simulation. But you have to understand when you open up that door, in that position, you open up outer space, inner spectrum, setting up coordinates, get into delta heading, into travel. Okay? That's how you open up a door. Now, when you open the door, you're in outer space now. So the inner space is you inside your simulation, which is its pyramid, which is its compound, which is its facilitator, which is its open lines of panel, which is its command center, lines of communication in the hotel golf, right? So what you have to understand is understanding the energies that you're going through in all communication setting, all through travel and track communications, right? So it gets more complicated if you understand how to understand what a door is, okay? Because you're going through all communication setting and travel. That's why we have pyramids everywhere. We have pyramids above ground, we have pyramids in water, we have pyramids above water, we have pyramids underground. There's pyramids everywhere, okay? Those are the crystal activators, okay? You have to truly understand how to use that in the modulation system. They're connected in line screen adaptation of sacred geometry, but there's all lines of communications of pyramids. It's all levels and set tractions. They're all different angles, they're all different time, they're all line communication setting, but they work with you in platforms of communication and setting and travel. Okay, all different platforms of all in position location of pyramids. But all you guys are seeing is just a door. right? You have to send the center of the door, okay, and the handles of the door, right? So you're going this way, okay, but you're opening it this way, okay? So you're this way, you're opening it that way, okay? So it's sure you're standing in directions of what you're doing, but you're constantly going to solar sail lines of travel, directed lines of communication to a system all through traction. You have to go through a solar sail, a dimensional sail, a track sail, a communication sail, a vortex sail, a communication lines of travel, position of point lines of graph sail, right? All through tractions. Setting lines, back and center operation. Monitoring your systems, lines of travel, in center operation. Okay? So you can see it in all different angles of traction. Okay? So once you understand that, then you understand the windows of frames that you're going through and setting. Right? Window frames, door frames, 2 door frames and travel. Oh, look at that, door disappeared. Oh, it disappeared again. Oh, there it is. So it goes to door recognition 1, door recognition lines of 2, and back and center door recognition lines of setting, right? So you're back inside in position location of center operation, okay? Very, very complicated stuff, but it's a lot of fun if you understand what happens when you open up a door. So when you open up a door, the mind conception can have any thought of anything. It's got to be empty, because if it's not empty, it overrides the existing already, which you set up in your blueprint. So it changes you in the mind of conception that takes the inner force back to its outer force. That processes you in that position. You start living in the past, present, and future of separation just by opening up a door, okay? But it's very powerful when you understand the connection setting. So it really does become Dr. Strange. All right, and seen on all 4 different angles and set tractions, all right? So here's the door again. Start with that, right? Docking 1, docking 2, docking 3, docking 4. Okay, you got a simulation ground, calculation setting. So you already know what's going to be there. You're not looking on the other side. You're just mind projecting that you're already there through pi. Right? So you're here, okay, and you go through your platforms to get there. To get there, guys, in traction. Okay, you go from here, here, and there. There you are, right? There is your simulation. There's your window, okay? So I'm trying to get you guys to understand how this all works. Everything is a different simulation, right? So it's all set up in modification to your settings of your blueprints and track communications all through traction, right? So it's important you understand that, how this all works, and all different platforms of communication. Okay, see? Gradient lines, screen lines, adaptation system, all through traction. Very powerful stuff, right? So remember, every time you're going through a door, empty mind, empty space all the time. You get angry, you get frustrated, check this out. There's a door, right? As soon as you touch a door and you get emotional, right? As soon as you touch the handle of the door, okay, the door falls off handle. It goes down, it doesn't go up. It doesn't go in its platform. The platform goes in 3 centers of travel, all in set calculation setting, right? So you don't know where you're going now. So if you're supposed to be going straight like that, you want to go through here, right? That's what you want to do. But if you get emotional, you're going here. You're up here. You're in the 18th dimension right now in traction. You're stuck. You're stuck. What are you going to do? Come back? Because that portal's closed. So if you're not controlling your mind, that portal, that door that you went through is not there anymore, because you're not controlling the mechanisms of your simulation. Everything around you will start controlling you in the simulation. You don't want that. That's the next level for the team. So don't have any mind of any thoughts, of any actions, of any emotions occurring your system of travel. You understand that? Because every time you go through a door, this is what happens when you get emotional. You're in the 18th dimension and your body's there and has no idea what's going on. So your body is like, wow, anxiety, stress, and fear. I was happy when it went through the door, but now I'm sad. Whoa, wait a minute, I'm looking around. This doesn't look familiar. So when you start seeing a different structure, you realize you're not there anymore. You're in a different frequency. You're a different hologram. You're a different structure. You're in a different primer. You realize this is not my home. I'm in somebody else's home. And that's what you're doing. You're not just going through dimension of space. You have to get into grounds. So you're going into something else. You're going somewhere else. You're going to another hologram. You're going to another hotel. You're going to another golf through perception, through Papa uniform. Do you understand that? Every single time. So you go through one door, that's you. That's your home, right? And then you go through another door, that's somebody else's home. Okay? That's what you're doing. You're traveling here, and then you're going up there through pi. So you're here, but you haven't gone through, right? But you see what's there, so you don't go through it because you realize it's not your home. It's at different frequencies. So you go through pi, you know exactly where you need to go. Now you're going straight. That's where you go in tractions. You go here, you don't go there, right? So all you're doing is the mind conception sets up the projection that you're already there, all through pi. Okay? And that's all it is. That's all this is. Okay? So if you're not directing your system, you're obviously not understanding what you're doing. Now, this comes in Justin Bureau. Let's say you get in the position, I love the center lines of the door itself, structure and setting locations, right? So directing this way, okay? Okay, and then you go this way in tractions, the opposite direct state locations, right? And then you go into the center operation. So you're creating the Fibonacci, right? That creates the flux of its door itself, okay? That sets the structure and set position, location to its system, all right? That sets the intelligence of operation, okay? That's the intelligence that you're dealing with of the door itself, okay? So what you have to truly understand, that position locations, you have intelligence that's protecting you. You can have safeguarding screens, adaptation to its system. You can have anything line screen adaptations. When you leave your house, you can keep vanguards outside your system. This is amazing how you have guards outside protecting your door or your house outside your system. But this is you in face recognition protecting everything in set line communications. So nobody can infiltrate your house and trash it. Okay? This is very powerful when you go to the next level, but you have to understand this and travel of what goes on. Already know you have no lines of anything that coming to mind a perception because it changes everything in frequencies. Okay? You're not just in empty space. You're somewhere else. So you're somewhere else in someone's place. You're in some grounds. But where are you? Right? That's the question, right? And where you are, you have to be consciously aware. If you're not consciously aware, you're not consciously aware of your frequency. You're not consciously where your energy is. You're not consciously where your body is in real time. Okay? So if you go through platform A, this is a platform A. Start with that, right? Location grid, there's the door that you go through, right? You go through that, right? And you're realizing you're setting up security lines of panel. That process, so nobody can penetrate inside the wall, right? This is a plasmazing wall that nobody can get through in position, location, your system, and tractions, all right? So that's protecting you through travel as you're going through that settings. But one thing you have to modify is that where you want to go is already through pi. Okay, so you don't get confused because it's already set up and now you see your simulation. Okay, that's your simulation, right? That's your next place that you go to, that you want to go to. Now when you time jump, time leap, jump scar, or vortex, it's different levels of communication to its setting. So vortex is this. This is you, point dot center, right? Vortex is basically going from here to here, right? Time jump is here to here, okay? So jump scar is here and back, okay? So we understand how to go through a door and all lines of communication, what we're doing through the mind perception, how we're doing these interactions. 3 centers of travels and 3 track correlations, okay? Setting communication lines of grounds and surface of travel, okay? Windows, frames, track centers, overline center location system, all 3 calculations, okay? And then you can into the grids of your pyramids and travel, all through set, all through traction, all through locations, all right? So you got a window frame here, box frame here. Okay, this is now you're in your simulation, okay? And you have a door over here and set tractions, okay? Now, you're inside the simulation, right? So you get an angle points line directions of 3 centers and 3 travel communications, Okay, how your simulation is set up is from inside and outside, outside in. So you're looking from inside out now when you're in the simulation. But to travel there, you got to go from outer space to inner space to delta heading. And when you get there, you're now in inner space of the simulation. Looking around and travel. Okay? That's you looking around where you are in your next place of destination. Okay? And so you want to go into grids, over a cross line, here's another door you go through. And into another simulation, which is another room. All right? So always get in position where your mind is, always see yourself already there through pi. The pi communicates to a system all through travel, guys. You understand? Very complicated because it sets up graphs and 4 lines of settings and lines of course, set, location, setting, and travel. So once you understand that position location system, this is what your door actually is. Very complicated stuff. Start with 4 sequence lines of 5 lines of centers, basic door, right? Okay, so once you stand that, you stand the grids. Start with that, two tracks. Then you have the panels, 2 tracks, 2 panels, line rotation setting to surface. And then you get in that communication setting a ceiling and rotation setting attractions, right? So you're here in position. Now you're inside your simulation. Okay? So, and you're looking this direction. Okay? There's your pyramid and attractions. Okay? So you're always seeing 4 different directions all at once in a simulation. So you're constantly changing. Oh, look at that. You saw it disappear, right? So every time you change in setting, you're changing circulation rotations of your system all through tractions. Going in all directions all at once. See? You're not allowed to see it because your frequencies are too low and frequency lines of grounds. Now you see it, right? Now you see the spectrum of this. Now you see the spectrum of this. So if you want to change the structure of your modification model in your prototypes, you can change the communication lines of time. Change the spectrum of your schematics location system all through tractions, inside and rotation. Inside rotation. Right? So now you're in a probe. Now you're in an orb. Okay? So it's amazing how you go through dimensional doors, how you can transform yourself into anything in traction. Very, very powerful stuff, guys. Okay? So hopefully that gives you a high core sense of dynamics, how to see yourself in travel. Okay? How you communicate to setting, you change the communication setting of timelines, change the sequence lines of panels, and track communications. Okay? Directly there, now I can go through pi into another portal, right? So I go through a portal, I go through another wormhole and line screen adaptation of changing the schematics of a structure of a design line communication setting to its wormhole. Setting screen adaptations over flux over screen adaptation of 45 angles and traction, right? And this is all done in a simulation. So I'm constantly changing the simulation of different lines of sequence of panel. Okay, inside line rotation. Okay. So it just, it gets more complicated, but you have to understand the structure first. How you want to set up, how you see it through a simulation. Okay? So when you understand the grids, then let's get into 2-point graphs in the box frame. That's why I like perspective. Okay, cross angles and set positions, right? 3 window tracks, 3 centers of travel. Okay? Then we go into the location grid, inside rotation, not outside traction. Okay, so it's getting a little bit more complicated, but it simplifies the line coordinate centers, line communication setting, and its temperature reading to travel, right? If it's off position, bring it together because you can't travel in its position locations and get in connections with its telepathy and send it through telekinesis. It's all got to be together, right? Can have only open panel. It's like you're communicating to your name, but you have an open name, which means that you're exposing your name and set lines of travel, right? So always have everything locked in. All right, so travel lines of 3 centers of travel, okay? 4 lines of measure of travel, okay? And then you have a dimensional door inside travel communications, okay? So it gets more complicated, but it's a lot more fun on different angles of communication, okay? And then you ground the shift lines of anomaly, crossing angles of point lines of communication lines of setting. So I'm showing you different ways to create your simulation. All you're doing is you're connecting the dots and set tractions. That's all you're doing is set positions, all through set position lines of travel. Okay? Okay, and then you change the angle points of the door in a Fibonacci screen adaptation to a system that change the portals of communication lines of time and track communications. Okay, change directions, offline center, inside rotation. 3 centers of operation service in a portal communication setting to time set traction. Sets calculates lines of security defense, 3 lines of signals, 3 lines of grounds of surface of travel. Okay? All right, so this is already set up for your next simulation. So you're protecting yourself every time you go through a door because you created it through your blueprint, right? And that's the handle that you go through and travel. That's the door. You go through that, right? So when you're processing that in that position location, here's the structure of your simulation to another setting, to another room. Okay, that's another room. You go from this, there's the door. You go through there, right? Change the angles in that position location of traction. Okay, very powerful stuff. Your schematics is all connected to setting. All right, so you ground your settings and structure, and then you come into a line communication setting, all through set position, right? Now it's a building, a structure of design. It's a building, right? So you changed your structure, you remodeled your system through creating. So once you understand how to go in the rotations of the spin, everything you're looking at is moving with you in direction. And that's how you change everything of structure of design and schematics on different angles of point communication. Okay? Isn't that amazing how you see that in all different levels? Right? All through schematics and all communication with setting. Right? So, but you have to understand the basic grounds and know exactly what goes on, okay, through platform of grounds, of gridding, and 3 platforms of set tractions. Okay, into window frame. It's a circulation of location frame. Okay, so I'm just showing you different angles, guys, how this all works. Basic understanding, right? How you rotate the system, portal lines, everything is a portal, everything's a Stargate, everything is travel. Oh, look at that, disappeared right itself, see? It's traveling too fast. Oh, look at that, won't let me get you in position here because you're not ready in frequency. Oh, see, it doesn't want to show you. I'm drawing it, but the frequencies are too fast. There you go. Now, in that position location, and here's the door. Here's the handle. That's what you're going through. Oh, handle's there. It's missing. Now it's gone. Oh, it just doesn't want me to put the handle there. There it is. There's the handle. So, when you go through that door, remember, you set it up through the perimeters of parameters. You set up the security fields, so you know exactly what you set up. You're protecting yourself every time you touch that door. So you know exactly how it's set up. You set up position lines of traction centers and 2 lines of signal location system all through traction. Oh, look at that, disappeared by itself. You're gonna have a lot more fun now because we're gonna go into the line communication simulation, what happens when you open up a door. So when you open up a door, you're opening up your paradigm and position your settings to your position, which is your pyramid. Set calculation setting. Okay, calculation lines equilibrium, ground centers of service, and travel communication of 2 pyramids of setting lines. But you need 3 pyramids of grounds to set travel. Okay? So, pyramid 1 setting, process line calculation setting, crossing angles of 45 flux lines of screen adaptation to setting and traction. Setting grid line screens, adaptation to the platform line centers, operation lines of power generation lines of set position location, and simulation lines of traction. Setting ground lines of platform, setting lines of high position location, measure, and scale. So your simulation has to have 3 lines of 4 lines of position lines of signals and ground lines of surface. Okay? Okay, so what you're in position of is the simulation itself, with your store, windows, frame, and traction. Okay, so, and then you can see the platforms of the doors. Okay, and set position location of face recognition of time centers of sequence, all different angles and track communications, right? So the more you understand your simulation, you understand that you set up through a blueprint. Okay? But that's what happens when you go through a door. You already set up the platforms. It's already set up, right? So the gridding line screen adaptation system has a pyramid line of track centers. You can offline the sequence, change the panels of operation, set calculation in mind, a perception location to a setting. Okay, you can change the different angles, all communication setting of surface and traction. Okay, you can change the wind tunnels and line screen adaptations, all through set positions and setting calculation. Okay. So it gets more complicated when you guys in level than what you see through a dimensional door. Okay, because you're always seeing, not the other side, you're just seeing the volume through pi of a clocking system, right? So clockwise, counterclockwise, center operation set calculation. All right. So line course centers of a clocking screen is going to position of 12 into 3 into 6 into 9. Start with that 4 set line conditions, right? Setting lines of sequence 9 over lines of 3. That's over through pi, right? 3 line signals, lines of 12. Set lines of tractions. 12 lines of 9. Line position over 6. Cross line angles. Portal communicates inside tractions. A 3 set calculation of clocking. So it gets more complicated. And that's setting lines communications. Okay? A lot more complicated, right? And this is your door that you're going through, that you set up through the simulation. See, the thing is, guys, what you understand is that your simulation that you created is protecting you from everything else. And once you understand how this is all set up, you understand the blueprint, how it constructs the infrastructure and set position, because you're protecting yourself every time you go through your door, right? So nobody can come in your door and back door to weaken through that line communication system, right? If there's a 12 line center and your door is open, like this in frame, this is your door open, right? Your door is open. It's not locked in setting. It's disappearing, right? So the intelligence comes in a 12 line waving panel, process line inside the door itself, takes over the infiltration of your door, recalculates, modify inline center line connection setting, creates its planetary line center line connection setting, clocking screen adaptations, changing all communication in your solar systems, sending communications high center location, deviation line core centers, defrag the communication lines of travel. Right? So it's no longer your set position now. It's been taken over. Okay, through infiltration. So it's basically understanding, your connection system that you basically put these things out. Okay, for example, you have a box frame. Okay, you want to protect yourself, you put an energy field. Okay, that's location grid. The location grid is the energetic dome, guys. That's what a location grid is. Set tractions, all right? Very powerful stuff. So it's protecting the box, which is protecting the door. Okay, which is protecting location and setting and travel. Okay, so once you understand that, then you travel through the outer space. Right, that's the outer space, right? And then you go here, and here's your simulation. There's the location that you're going to through destination, right? Okay, and then you have your blueprints of this, right? Over here, here, this here, and this here, that here, right? That's your simulation you're going to, right? So every time you go through a door, you're protecting yourself, right? So the higher you go, the more you connect to your mind, line, screen, adaptation, and setting. So let's get into barcoding. Barcoding lines, 3 centers of signals, all right? Information grounds, finger point lines of graph. 3, 4, and 5 traction, okay? Circuits, lines of panels, process of indication, setting, and travel, right? Points, lines, settings, height, platforms, and ground center location system. Remember, you have to go through pyramids and travel. Point, lines, and setting, location to a system. 3 pyramids, right? And then you can position location your settings to your platforms and traction. Okay? And that's all through your door. There's our handle right there. Oh, look at that, disappeared. All through setting. Okay? And when you go through the door, you're going this way. So you're already setting up the laser of the doors itself or what you're going through. Right? So when you go that way, you have to go this way because that's where your other door is and set tractions. Set up the lines of 2 division. So you set up past, present, and future of laser track communications. Right? So you go from that door to that door. So you know where you're going, right? So you go from there and you go this way. Okay? You don't go that way. If you go this way, you change your mind. So you don't change your mind, it's already set up. As soon as you get into thoughts, you're traveling to another dimensional door, which is not yours anymore. So you go from one door to another door to another door. So when you open up doors, you open up 3 doors of 4 settings of panel. The process of communication is the plasmazing line sentence opens all the communication setting and travel. So you have to go through 3-dimensional doors in setting, 3 doors. Right? So you go 1, 2, and 3. Okay? Here's the handle. Okay? This is you touching the door and set tractions. So when you touch the door, this comes in set locations. All right? And it sets a charge and center operation that creates its portal of travel of outer space. And then you travel through it, through the inner spectrum. You coordinate it first. Coordination lines, line communication lines of Jupiter, lines, atmosphere lines, green adaptations of flux. Okay, you set the coordinates, and then you travel through pi. Okay, but you guys have to first understand how to travel through a door and understand how to go through 3 centers of travel. Okay, and then you go through pi. Okay, until you understand that you created it in set position, no levels. Here's your next door and set tractions and direction to go through. Okay, so you have to truly understand how this all works, right? So we're looking at triangulation, right? It's very powerful stuff, and all lines of trifactors, tri-screens, all I-core centers, right? So this is past, present, and future. Past, present, future, right? So you're passing through here, your future is there, and your present is there in traction. All right? So you change the graph. There's the location grid. There's the door. Okay? Now, here's the handle. Okay, that's the handle there, right? So as you go through, you already set up your simulation, which is over here in traction, through an open window, right? Structure line, direct sig locations, right? That's the other door, right? Change the angles, change the point graph, communication setting of travel. Okay? Set calculation lines of the present, process and position of the future, set positions back in past, back and center operations setting in sequence. Okay? So it gets very complicated once you understand what you're doing through travel in directions. It modifies the center operation of what you're doing in set positions, all through mind of the modification, right? All through a door. Okay? Very, very powerful stuff in travel. Okay? It gets complicated because you're circulating through a Fibonacci. You're going through a portal, guys. You're going through a Stargate. So you're going through volume and mass. So what you're going through is your female and your male polarity is traveling through the particle system into settings of 3 tractions. All right? And this is your door. Okay? So your door is automatically going through 3 centers. Okay, set position of 2, set positions of 1. There's the door. There's 3 doors there, right? Okay. 3 platforms, right? 3 doors in the opposite direction, right? 3 windows in the opposite direction. Okay? So it's about understanding how you set yourself in the simulation. And it's much easier to understand how to go through that through your panels into graphs of your highways. 3 graphs, center calculation setting, past, future, past. Right? So every time you're going through the past, what are you doing? You're going through outer space. If you're going into the presence, you're going into outer space. So it doesn't matter. You're always going from outer space because the simulation puts you already where you are, which is the inner space. You set the coordinates and then you travel through. Right? So you got the past here, platforms and setting. That's the past. Look at the demographics to set location of the system. Okay? Then you go through alpha, beta, zeta, gamma, zeta. Okay? Now you change the graph communication setting, lines of travel. Okay? Sets calculation lines of brain convergence centers, sets the operation lines of sequence lines of panels, electrical line grade communication to the system. Process calculation lines, open lines of panels, and process line communication setting, all through the I receptor travel. All right? Sets calculation lines of 0 line, rotation surface and travel in that communication setting, open lines of sequence. Okay? Ground centers, Schumann resonance, and set position lines of travel. Spin tunnels, operation lines, sequence lines of past, present, and future, and set course centers of coordinates in communication setting to my solar system and travel. Okay? All through settings, all through set position of circuits over screen. Booyah. All right? Powerful stuff, right? And here's my door, right here. So I set it up already because it's already in the mind line setting, but you always have to understand there's a door, there's always a handle. So as you go through, that's what you're going to see, right? Which is your simulation. That's your simulation, your next destination, right? So it's amazing how you set these things up, right? But it's absolutely incredible how you go through the lines of door lines and sequence lines of panel. The process of communication system is to understand how to go through the formulas. So 4 line signals, 3 lines of grounds. So each corner is the past, present, and future is always in the center. Future is always in the center because future is 0 equals lines of 0 in traction. Triangulation lines of 0, triangulations of 0, triangulations of 0, triangulation of 0. Okay, there it is. Future adaptation existing all at once and panels of operation, circulation, rotation. Pretty simple, right? So, and this is through the door, and there's the handle. Okay, let's change it over. So, false narrative, truth narrative, truth narrative, false narrative, false narrative, truth narrative, false narrative, truth narrative, false, 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 truth, 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 false. So, as you go faster, your modulation setting of your door mechanisms change the course of time. Okay, so let's say you want to get into the past, 3 lines of angles and travel. Okay, there's the door that you're going to go through. Okay. So it sets lines, sets back, and tracks centered location in the line communications of center of present location. Okay? Very complicated, but you get a true understanding how to go through a door. But you set up a door, you set the blueprint, that's how you guys set up. So your simulations are already set up through creation. You've got to get into that position, how you set it up in the first place. All right, because that protects you from everything else, agents and sentience and travel. Okay? And you change the platforms of communication. Okay? Bedding, screen lines adaptations of grounds, high lines of surface, and 3 lines of angles, setting line communications, setting lines of travel. Okay? Process angles, center course centers, line switching, screen adaptations of part acceleration system, all through traction. Right? Sets calculation grounds. There's your door. And there's your handle. There's your door, there's your handle. So you're constantly changing schematics every single time you're going through simulation, right? So it's really interesting when you come into that recourse in line communication setting in all directions all at once. Very powerful stuff, eh, guys? Boy, it's looking amazing how I set that up in my simulation. So nobody was able to get it past or through. So nobody can get in and nobody can get out. You understand? Because you locked yourself in and set position lines of travel. Your simulation is already set up. In line, position, location, your settings, and travel communications. So when you walk in this structure and division, you walk into another structure of schematics that puts you in another realm of communication setting, that puts you in another simulation system to your solar system. Right? Because you're already set up for schematics, through travel. So, but see how that works in lines of communications, guys? Very powerful stuff, isn't it? All through structure, all division, all through design. Okay? Understand the basic grounds of travel and mechanisms and know exactly how to go through a dimensional door. Okay? Setting lines of out space, in space, coordinates into travel, right? Location grid, platform, travel. That's all it is. And there's the door in set position. That's all it is, all right? Then you come into volume, then you come into different doors and traction. All right? Change the platforms. There's the gridding. Okay, then you cross in over angles of travel. You have window frames and track frames and communication frames of travel. Okay? And over here is your other simulation. In this door setting, right here, there's your simulation. Right here. That's your next destination. So you're looking at the door right here. This is the door. It's set position. That's the door, right? And you're going to go here to get to your destination. Okay? You're not going to go in the opposite directions. Because you're going in the opposite, you set in motion. So that detects your system and changes your modification system all through travel in direct lines and direct and read line connection setting the surface. It operates the settings of panels to its screen lines that communicate through the setting, all through traction. Okay? Opens all lines of anomaly, high line centers of travel in position, location, or simulation to its graph. inside travel. All through setting, through traffic inventories and traffic communications. Inside rotation. All through calculation. All right? So many ways to see that in door mechanism. All right? Because remember, your simulation is already set up inside line connections. You just have to stand to see yourself in the simulation itself. Now, if you want to change the door, you change the door. Right? So there's a lot of things you can do inside and outside through structure. But you have to stand your provisions, outside lines, inside tractions of coordinates, and position of all line communications of delta heading. So it gets more complicated. The structure gets more complicated, but it gets a lot more fun when you're standing in that communication setting, how to use it through X-ray. So you set a box center, inside rotations, inside lines of tractions. 3 centers of operation. Right? Change the angle. Right? Let's add the equation. Okay? Here's the door. Okay? Here's the handle. All right? So you're supposed to go here to the next door. All right? This is the door. Okay? Then you go out the door. You're in outer space now. Okay? And you travel to a platform of another destination through another door setting. Okay? So that's how it's all set up. Outside, inside, and then basically you come in ground centers into the simulation, which is inside the simulation itself. Okay? So I'm just showing you on different spectacles how you see yourself on all dimensional lines of doors. How you travel through. All through track communications and your schematics. Okay? All through 4 angles of traction. Okay? But that's where you have to stand the triangulation box. What that means, the triangulation and the box in the center. Okay? Flux, flux. Okay? Panels, panels. Ceiling, box. All right? Change the angles. Travel point lines and graph communications. Directing ground centers, online signal. Ground centers of surface and travel. Okay? Setting offline communications, inside lines. Door recognition of timelines. Door recognition of 3. Door recognition lines of 4. And door recognition lines of 5 in sequence. And door recognition lines of 6 location setting into your pyramid and travel. There's your pyramid and travel. Okay? Ground centers of service. Gridding and cross-line ground centers of 45 communication lines of flux over tractions. Okay? Online signals, panel operation screens, and ceilings of rotation. Okay? High signals, there's another dimensional door. There's another dimensional door. And on the other side, line rotations. Directing and redirecting in set position, right? So you go through this door, you go through this platform, crossing in that line setting. No emotion, you get to another destination, which is another simulation, which is another command center. Okay, it's attractions. Okay? So understand the schematics, understand the formula, understand the equations, everything gets so much easier to understand what you're doing to travel, right? So you're directing, redirecting, center operation of travel. Okay, that's all you're doing. But don't have anything in the mind conceptual setting because the mind has already set it up as soon as you touch the handle of the door. And that's what you have to modify. Because everything you bring in thoughts, that's where you're going to travel next in real time. And it's going to affect your day in your 24 cycles and travel. Into 48 frames, into 72 computer line settings, into 144 crystal grid. And all through communications, all through tractions. Okay? See you in 5.